Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome back to SocietyCast, our new virtual speaker series aimed at facilitating inspiration, insights, and innovation amongst our network, amongst all of you. I'm your host. My name is Vianney Lewis, Vice President of the Alumni Society, and I'm coming to you here from my home in Chicago. Now, to kick off, and I see many of you are already doing this, which is fantastic. I want to encourage you to use our live chat, share where you're joining us from in the world, say hello to one another and to us, and let me know if you can see and hear me okay. We've also added what I think is a very interesting poll question, which is tied to our theme today. So feel free to just take a quick moment to briefly answer that, and that is located just below our video screen here where it says polls. So in just a moment, I'm going to go ahead and bring up our speaker, but before I do that, I just want to take a quick moment to run through a few housekeeping items, share how our program is going to go today. So today we're going to have 15 minutes or so with our speaker, 15 to 20 minutes, followed by an interactive Q&A session with all of you. So I encourage you all to participate today. It's going to be a good one. There are two main ways to ask your questions. So during the talk, you can submit a question at any time using the Ask a Question feature, which also is located just below the video screen here. And a pro tip, if someone has a question that is similar to yours and you want to make sure that it gets answered, go ahead and upvote it. It'll rise it to the top and we can get to that one first. Also, backstage, I'll be monitoring the chat box here, so feel free to use that if that's easier for you as well. So let's go ahead and invite our speaker to join us. Hello, Eduardo.
Hello, buenas tardes. Saludos a todos.
Yes. So everyone, I want to introduce you to our speaker today, Eduardo Villavicencio, who is joining us from his home in Virginia and is talking to us about the very timely topic of well-being. Eduardo is a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach who has more than 20 years of experience in designing and delivering training for leaders across an organization. He recently started working as a training facilitator in the change management and adoption department at Acumen Solutions. And so Eduardo is here today at SocietyCast to share strategies for fostering well-being in ourselves, in our familia, in our communities, in the midst of quarantine life. And that is through the integration of the 5 elements of well-being, which is a model by Gallup. And so Eduardo, very honored to have you here with us today. And I'll let you take the floor and I'll be back for Q&A.
Excellent. Gracias. Yes, thank you so much. Well, let me go ahead and share my screen and you can confirm. There we go. Let's just see. Oh, there we go. Well, buenos dias, buenas tardes from across the country, it looks like. Los Angeles, my hometown, San Diego, a bunch of folks. Thank you all for joining. Like Vianney said, Eduardo Villavicencio, and gosh, I love hearing my last name correctly. Thank you so much, Vianney, for doing that. And let's just start off to make sure everyone gets a moment. I really appreciate you being here live or perhaps later recorded, but hopefully this in your day, taking the time to actually join me. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to cover in the next couple of minutes, but as she said, this is going to be highly interactive and it gives me a pause to have an opportunity to connect with all of you during this time. And this is actually a topic that would be even outside of this time. So, Estamos bien, filling our well-being bucket. Let's go ahead and let me just give you a preview. We talked about that poll. So if you haven't had a chance to fill the poll, let's take a look. And the question was, imagine your life represented by a ladder with steps, with 1 being at the bottom, right? And 5 being at the top. And that top is representing the best life possible. Where do you think you are right now? So if you've already answered it, that's great. If you haven't, take a breath and answer it. For those of you who didn't take a breath before, maybe do it again, and I'm sure you could change your vote. But let's take a look, and if you pull that up yourself, you can see we have 2, 3, and 4s, and we have about 17 people so far. So as you think about that, whatever number you did, whatever number you put down, let's just make sure you get clear that, hey, it's all right, wherever you're at right now. And that's why I asked the question, right now. So the real interesting question would be from this, right? And we see 69% are at 3s, okay? From this question, what I want to know from you is in the chat, okay, where do you think you're going to be? Let me go ahead and make sure that we're in the right place. Where do you think you'll likely be in the next 5 weeks? Go ahead in the chat. How would your number go up? Did the number go down? How far up? Write down. So I see 4s, ups. What you see in the next 5 weeks, where do you think you'll put that number, 1 through 5? And as you do that, think about all the things that you already think about well-being. When you signed up to register for this conversation, I'm sure you already thought what you knew was well-being. And so I'm going to ask you about that in a little bit. But I see probably the same couple people in the same place, hoping for up, but possibly the same. Thank you so much for that honesty. Okay. Now, let's go ahead, and I'm going to put a little chat pause here. Where do you think you'll be in the next 5 years, though? Okay, 5 years. Can you even imagine that? May 2025. Where do you think you'll be in the next 5 years? And go ahead and give me that number, 1 through 5. Now, why am I starting with this question? Well, first of all, it might be the only time you've asked yourself this question today, in the last week, maybe in the last 8 weeks. And I'm wondering if you've ever when do you ever ask yourself this question? When do I ask myself? I'll tell you, since Vianney and Jill and the Alumni Society since we spoke about this talk, I've been thinking about well-being all the time. Okay? And it's not like I hadn't thought about it before, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But what the research says is for those of us who have the number for today and take a number for 5 weeks from now and have it higher, doesn't matter how much, or higher than that for 5 years from now, there's a category of well-being. And this is the research that I'm going to talk about today. Because for those of you who did that, then Gallup would consider you in the thriving, right? What's your future state? What do you actually think today is going to be in the future? For those of you who picked the same number, that's all right. That would be in the struggling. And many of you didn't even pick a number below that, okay? And that would be suffering. And I'm glad a lot of you aren't there right now. And if you are, that's okay as well. Because what I'm going to share with you today is what I've learned, not just personally, but in terms of the research. And as Vianney said, I'm a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach. And for those of you who don't know that, it's probably an assessment you took somewhere at work or in college. It's about the top 5 strengths you have. And when I got certified as a Gallup coach, I just saw all this other research. And most of you have heard of Gallup polls and such. So let me just go ahead and begin our presentation because I really want to get to you guys getting to get a sense of what is the 5 elements of well-being. But before we do that, I like to start with acknowledgements. Okay, first of all, the Alumni Society. Thank you for the last 2 years. You guys have made me part of the community. I really appreciate you inviting me to be not only a member, but also a contributing member as well. Also, to my network of coaches, not just from Gallup, but from all these other areas. Everyone from my chiropractor in Rockville, Maryland, to my chiropractor in Falls Church. Like this journey of wellness, when I used to think it was only about physical health, really started like in 2010 when I used to walk with a cane and weighed 260 pounds. Okay, so fast forward, I got to a place where in 2016, I was able to run 15 half marathons in 1 year. And at the end of my first full marathon, I got down on one knee, and not because I was hurt, but because I wanted to propose to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my fiance, Juanita Niehaus. So mis amigos, mis amigas, and mi familia. And the reason I bring up mi familia is because right now I'm thinking about Happy Mother's Day for all, belated Mother's Day for all of you, esas mamás que están ahí, who, like potentially my mom, is a frontline worker. You can see a picture here of my mom and my brother and my nieces. Shout out to them. The reason I bring this up is because you'll hear from Gallup and from the research in Gallup about how important familia is. And when we talk about wellness, that's one thing. We talk about well-being and the research. Really, I wanted to bring this to the Latino conversation because when we hear social distancing, I really thought, no, that's more like physical distancing because you're not going to tell a bunch of Latinos and Latinas to be socially apart, right? That just doesn't work for us, I believe, right? And definitely wouldn't have worked for me. So here to all the frontline workers, whether you're officially a frontline worker or not, you're probably mothering someone in your neighborhood. You're probably taking care of them as well, whether it be your neighbors, the kids, the next door neighbor's kids and so on, whoever you're taking care of, thank you, and happy belated Mother's Day. And this is dedicated to my mom, who, although she's no longer here, I do remember every time I would call her after I moved across the country to go to college, she would always start the conversation with, Mijito Eddie, ¿estás bien? Now, my mom's the only one that has permission to call me Eddie. So you can call me Eduardo or Ed. But, you know, I used to answer that question right away, and I totally would miss what she was actually asking. ¿Estás bien? So I'm asking you right now, Estamos bien? ¿Estás bien? Think about what that answer would be like for you, and feel free, I will glance a little bit at the chat. So now, one of the reasons I think about well-being and why this is so important, my own well-being, is because of my nieces. You know, I actually, although I don't have kids of my own, I know that my nieces out there in Wisconsin, I love hearing Uncle Eddie, and they're calling me almost daily to talk about what's up there. And you know what? That's been great because then I can actually think about another perspective. So today, this is the quick agenda. We've already talked about my intentions, which is for you to really hear something new in your life that might support your well-being in one of these 5 areas and really help you fill that well of life that we're all committed to. Second, I'm going to ask you, what is well-being mean to you? It's an exercise I call Empty the Cup. Give you some research, do a small presentation about the 5 elements, and then get a chance to discuss some best practices, because I'm not an expert, right? I'm a learner and discoverer just like you. I'm bringing this conversation so that we can all pull in from the comunidad, the familia that we have here, and bring in best practices from you. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So let's start. Empty the cup. What do I mean by that? Put in the chat right now, what does well-being mean to you? Anything, 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, and I'll read them out. What does well-being mean to you? When you heard about this talk and you signed up, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I know what that is. So connection, balance, happiness, a couple of folks say, grounded, creating more justice and inclusion in the world, gracias, peace within, purpose, actualization, stress-free, positivity. Excellent. So all of this, all of you have these ideas, these thoughts, these concepts, what I like to call inherited conversations. They're in the background, and potentially because you were either raised in this country or raised in another country, but whatever conversation came over with your ancestors, right, and that you were born into, it's always in the background. And I want you to think about, well, what does well-being mean to me? Do I only think of it in 1 or 2 elements or 1 or 2 factors? Okay, so let me tell you, here's a quick little word cloud. Okay, some of the words that you've already mentioned: strengths, well-being, leadership, emotions, resilience. You know, if we did a word cloud, that's what it would be for you. So I'm going to ask you to just empty the cup of all of those words, and just for the next 10 minutes, let me give you an opportunity and offer you a new perspective that you can choose to fill in. Because I'm going to ask you to think of well-being as the concept of the well. Okay, what does a well look like? Here's an image for you. Okay, but the well, why would you even come to a talk like this? What's important to you? Okay, in the training world, we have a WIFM. What's in it for me? And I'm going to ask you right now, what's in it for you here? What would fill this well? What is your well about? Okay, and you can write that in the chat if you like, but how would you know that you're at a thriving place? What should go in that well? And that's what I'm actually going to address today. And you can think of it from a perspective of energy, like, do you have the energy to wake up every day or not? You know, and that's where positive thoughts, body, mind, goals. Thank you, Erica. So with that image of the well in mind, let me go ahead and tell you about Gallup's research and why I like to use the Gallup framework, as well as other models that are out there. Feel free to throw them in. Some of you may have heard of other models, but today we're going to focus on Gallup. So what do you envision in your well? What can you put down? Balance, perspective, calmness. Excellent. What do you envision in there? So let's begin with Gallup's research. So if you haven't heard about Gallup, go ahead and do a Google, but not right now, because in 2008, Gallup started a partnership with, at the time it was called Healthways, now it's called ShareCare. And they wanted to understand and measure the key factors that drove well-being in the USA. A couple years later, they actually took that to global, right? Global Well-Being Index was launched worldwide. More than 150 countries, hundreds of questions, and 175,000 interviews each year, and 2.8 million to date. And you can see the link right in there if you want to take a look. There's even a book called The 5 Essential Elements of Well-Being, and in it you get an access code to assess your own well-being, okay? A little bit more formally with the statistics and so on. 10 questions you can answer pretty easily. But what did they come up with? Well, first of all, Tom Rath and Jim Harder. You know, they each have their own story. Jim is the chief scientist of research for Gallup, and Tom Rath, he actually has an amazing personal journey on wellness that he shares in a couple of his other books that I'll mention towards the end. But the two of them basically gave this model. First, purpose. They used to call it career well-being, right? So I'm going to talk about the different essential elements of well-being, but now they call it purpose, okay? Second, social. What is social well-being? And as you hear me say these words, I want you to think, what are your thoughts automatic? What's your automatic, oh, I'm good at that. Oh, I know about that. Oh, I've done that. The third one, financial. Now, these are bulleted, but they're in a particular order that I'll share about later. Then we have physical, and finally, community. So here is a nice little diagram that gives you the 5 essential elements of well-being. However, for this talk, I don't want to talk about a model or a framework. I want to have you think back to that well and think of these as your 5 buckets, okay? These are 5 buckets that you can fill, right? Or you can dip out of. But the more that you fill your buckets, the more conscious you are about these buckets, the more likely your full well will be able to feel fulfilled as well. So feel free to type in any questions right there. I already see a couple things. So let me just take you through a quick, what are the 5 elements? What does it mean? So purpose, career. So they shifted that from career to purpose because we have, especially in our Latino community, a lot of entrepreneurs, right? We have a lot of business owners, a lot of folks out there who may not think of their job as their career, but they do have a purpose. And even if you retired, guess what? You still need a purpose. And so the kind of questions you want to ask yourself for this bucket is, do you like what you do every day? What do you look forward to when you wake up? Okay. Now I start with this one because really this is the one where the research shows that if you can't answer the question about purpose, well-being, okay, this is the question that if you can't answer it, you're likely to see a decrease in the other well-being buckets, okay? And if you can answer it, okay, with a 1 to 5, and let's just say you have a 3, 4, or 5, you're gonna have twice the odds of thriving in the other buckets as well. So right now, think about it. Feel free to put in the chat, what does purpose, well-being mean to you? The next one, social. Do you have strong relationships and love in your life? How often are you in touch with family, friends, networks of any kind? So some of the research says here that your closest relationships and social connections really determine how that you see your financial, physical, and community well-being. So if you think about social, do you have strong relationships? Let me ask you a question, or ask yourself this question. Over the last 8 weeks, have you talked to people that you hadn't talked to for at least a couple months before those 8 weeks? And how often? So purpose, Francisco saying purpose aligned with your authentic self to deliver impact. Great, I know you're talking about your purpose well-being. And again, I'm going through these kind of fast. Feel free to type them in as you want. But just to ask you that question, how many hours a day have you been on Zoom calls? Okay, anyone exhausted there? So thank you again for being here today with us. But how many of those calls are now new opportunities for you to connect? The research says that we actually, as human beings, need about 6 hours of social time. Now, even for those introverts, that's about 4.5. Now, some of you may be saying, I don't have that time. Well, actually, chances are at work, you're filling some of those buckets. That's why Gallup in its Q12 index, where it talks about employee engagement, one of the questions is, do you have a best friend at work? Do you have someone that you can trust? Maybe not on your team, someone in another department, but do you have that? Social. Francisco says too many Zoom calls. That's right, virtual, missing the personal interaction touch points. And great. And Francisco, you may want to look up some of the research that's talking about how we are now putting so much social currency into the Zoom calls that our physical selves are actually exhausted. Something called Zoom fatigue that I've been researching lately, because the brain doesn't know that you're not right here about 4 or 5 feet away. It actually almost is overwhelming because sometimes we can't be present, which is why I'm glad you're not on video, because then you'd be wondering, you know, just like I am sometimes, oh, can you see me? How do I look? Should I have worn this shirt or that shirt? So that's part of how we can help our managers and our colleagues maybe turn off all the videos except for who's speaking. That's a way that we can prevent the Zoom fatigue. And that's right, Francisco, Zoom fatigue is real. So that's social, okay? Let me go ahead and go to the next one, the third one. Financial. Now, you may think you know what this bucket is, but according to the research with Gallup, do you have enough money to do the things you want to do in life? It's actually a question you should ask yourself. What do you do with your money? Now, here's the thing. most people think that more income would lead to more happiness. It's actually financial security that makes the difference. If you have what you believe you need to be secure for you, for your spouse, your partner, for your household, your family, for your neighbors, or the family members who are either nearby or in a distant country, okay? That is that differentiation with finances. And one thing I want to let you know is that Harvard researchers show that spending money on ourselves doesn't actually boost our well-being. And when we're in a bad mood, it can lead to escalate a domino effect of bad financial decisions. Now, I bring that up because they also showed that spending money on others actually boosts our well-being. And over the last couple of weeks, some of you may have had a chance to gift for charity, right? Or go to your local food pantry and gift some time. One of the habits that I picked up a couple months ago has been to go to CVS or go to Starbucks and buy some gift cards, so that when I see someone in need, right, I don't have to think, oh, do I have money? Do I have cash? Or should I? Or I just literally say, hey, thank you, and here you go. And that's a practice that I realized every time I did that, apparently it goes right with the research. Now, the other thing about financial is Gallup says that buying experiences and memories completely increases the well-being in the other categories. So just to let you know that. Yeah, Jill, thank you. Giving makes you feel good. All right. Fourth one. Now, here's one that you may already think, I'm pretty good at that one. I know what physical well-being is. So let me just go ahead and have you ask yourself the question. Do you have good health and energy and enough energy to do what you want to do every day? So let me pause right now, because part of physical well-being is actually being present in your body. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to internally count to 10, which in radio is a lot of time for silence. And I'm just going to ask you to maybe close your eyes if you can, or at least take a deep breath. So 10. Okay. Open your eyes. If you closed your eyes, think about, can you feel physical well-being in your body? Where do you feel it? Over the last 2 or 3 years, I've learned that there's a whole wisdom in the body that some people refer to as somatic wisdom. And sometimes when we're going through our day, we actually don't even pay attention to. So sometimes when we have physical pain, whether it's in the shoulder or lower back or knees, it's really just our body talking to us. And sometimes we're focused on those other buckets of well-being that actually we forget that our body, if it was on loudspeaker like megaphone, right, and we could actually hear it, it would actually tell you what you need. So go ahead and look up somatic experiencing or somatic wisdom and see what you find. It's an interesting journey. Thank you, Pedro. I'm glad you started meditating. To be honest, and something I forgot to mention early on is right before COVID hit, I left the firm that I was at. And honestly, I was separated. And you know all that's code words, right? So I had a period of 6 weeks where I didn't have a job. And I want to mention that because this well-being talk came up during that time. Well, let me tell you, I wasn't focused on any of these buckets. I was worried, I was in fear, and the place that I was mostly in fear of was financial, right? And what I didn't realize is it was actually affecting those other areas, right? The physical part. And then socially, I wasn't actually connecting with my friends. And I was definitely not wanting to be on Zoom calls, okay? So I share that for you because I luckily found a company a couple of weeks ago that, yes, during this time is hiring. And so I want to let you know, for those of you who are entrepreneurs in between clients or are in between jobs, or you're just thinking, is this a time, how can anyone be hiring? There are people hiring. So put out in the network, put out in the community that you want help. And that's one of the biggest things that I had to learn as a Latino in my Latino tradition is it's okay to say, I need help. It's okay to say, I don't know. And it's definitely okay to practice saying, I was wrong. So that's physical. Let me just tell you the 3 things you should be asking yourself. What are you eating? In other words, how are you feeling yourself? How often are you moving? And how much do you sleep? And ironically, or coincidentally, sorry, that's the title of a book that Tom Rath wrote called Eat, Move, and Sleep. okay? If you can take a look at those three things, right? And ask yourself, what did you eat today? How much did you move today? How much did you sleep last night? Or at least promise yourself, how much sleep do you want to get tonight? Okay? Those three things would really help elevate your physical well-being game. And there's a bunch of other suggestions I'm sure we're going to hear from of how else you can do that. And by the way, that meditating, Pedro, I got to say, a couple weeks ago, I started with one of those apps on the phone, and it turns out that I've been meditating for 27 days in a row. And at first it started with the 3-minute version, then the 5, and now I'm up to between 10 and 15. And not commuting to work on a drive. How many of you are saving money on gas nowadays? Yeah. Well, guess what? You're also saving time. And if you could take half of that time or a quarter or even a tenth of that commute time and put it into some called meditating, reflection, just maybe breathing in the middle of your day, or better yet, in the morning, I think it would make a huge difference. Big fan of Calm and Headspace. Great, you have some app suggestions right there. Thanks so much, Francisco. And Brooke says, what app do you use? Oh, excellent. The one I use is 10% Happier, but there's a bunch of good ones. And you can even go to YouTube and find the 1-minute meditation. I found that about 10 years ago. And from time to time, I send it to people when they call me and they're super stressed. And I'm like, hey, do you mind if I send you a video? So shameless plug for 1-minute meditation is for those people who, like me, don't think that we have time to meditate. All right, finally, I'm going to do the last bucket. The last bucket is the community well-being. Do you feel like you belong to a community? Well, here you are today. You're definitely part of this community, okay? And whether you're a member or not of the Alumni Society, like any Latino familia, we invite you in, okay? How involved are you in the community activities? And do you take pride in the community? Now, what's interesting about this bucket here, right, is you get to judge how and what you consider your community. For some people, it's as simple as, do I live in an area that has clean and safe schools? Do I feel safe walking around right at dusk or at dawn? What's the cost of living? What are some of the offerings now? Okay. One of the things you should know about this one is that although in the Latino community, it might be very easy to think, oh yeah, we're part of a community. But this is actually the one that the well-being research shows that we forget about a lot. One reason that we want to not forget about this is the helper's high. Gallup refers to it that people who volunteer will inevitably feel stronger and more energized throughout their day and definitely more motivated after helping. So whatever it is, find a community or create one. You actually may be in a community right now that you haven't realized. You may have even taken it for granted. So pause for a second and think to yourself, is there a comunidad? Is there a community I'm part of? Or maybe is there one I've been resisting that has welcomed me and I haven't really opened myself up to it because I was like, oh, I'm not ready. Okay, that's all right. But ask yourself, where are your communities? All right, let's see if there's any questions right now, because at this point, here's our summary. Purpose, social, financial, physical, and community. Let's take a moment to figure out some of those best practices, because like I said, I can share some of my best practices, but I'd like to see if anyone here in the audience, go ahead and type in, what are some of those best practices for one of these? In the meantime, I'd also love to see if I can work one-on-one with someone about these 5 elements, these 5 buckets, and start with a discussion around that so that you can all see. Carly, thank you. You're welcome. Hey, Lucy.
Hi, Eduardo. How are you?
Good. How are you? It's good to see you again. Right? So Lucy and I, we met at one of the Alumni Society events, either a year or 2, right?
Exactly.
That's right. Awesome. Lucy, tell me just a little bit about yourself and why you volunteered to be part of our discussion today.
Sure. Well, it sort of ties in a little bit to community. As Eduardo mentioned, I've been a member of the Alumni Society. I actually learned about it through another membership through a group called High Tech. And I work at Fannie Mae. I manage a digital workplace team. And I'm just excited to be a part of this community. They've done some really great events, and I just love being active. And I'm also involved with Prospanica DC and part of the local board there. So it's just, I think community is just a really important part of all of this. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for the work that you do at Fannie Mae. You know, when this goes, I'll go back. I think our offices are pretty close to each other, actually. so we'll have to go.
I would love that. That'd be great.
Well, so let me ask you a question. Is this the first time you've heard of the 5 elements?
It is, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for volunteering and being courageous. That's actually one of the ways we can fill our buckets. So just real quick, any just first reactions or just impressions of these 5 buckets, just off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really interesting just to hear sort of the breakdown between them, because I think sometimes the concept of filling a bucket, I've heard a little bit about that, about trying to think of more of the positive things versus things that take away from the bucket. But I liked sort of how this goes a little bit deeper into the different segments and really understanding how they're all interlinked together.
Excellent. Well, good. Well, let me go ahead. So purpose, social, financial, physical, community. Do you remember those?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask you right now, and I'm going to ask the audience as well, which one of these do you think you naturally fill in your day? Okay, which one of these do you think you naturally fill in a day? And we're going to have the poll up there as well, so that people can reflect on that. And I know that you're ready to answer. You've probably been thinking about this already. So I'm going to pause you real quick and ask you, like, back to that well. What's the well for you? Like if we were going to take these buckets to fill a well, what's the well today for you? Like, what's your big why?
So I would say the social is probably one of the really important ones for me. Even one of the big challenges is I'm very extroverted, and this working from home, I've really made a conscious effort to stay connected, both with my family. I talk to my mom very regularly. We got the little family group chat going, and really connecting with friends and trying across different mediums as well. In making phone calls and in texting. And one of my routines, as we were talking about not having to commute, is doing some social distancing and getting to know neighbors, and spending a little bit more time sort of building new connections as well as deepening the connections that I've had.
Okay, excellent. And just to let you know, as people fill out the poll, I'm seeing that physical is one of the ones that people think, physical and social, one of the ones that people think they naturally fill each day. And what you just said, Lucy, was that social is the one, because you're extroverted, social is the one you naturally fill. And so has that been challenging to fill over the last couple of weeks for you? Or how have you done it differently?
So it's been interesting, because I was really concerned when we sort of heard this change and I'm not going to be able to go to the office. I was one of those crazy people that actually opted to go in on Fridays, even though most people worked remote, because I really liked to have that interaction. And I've just been sort of continuing to drive that and find ways to keep those social connections. And if anything, like you had mentioned also about talking to people that we haven't talked to in a while, it's actually been a great excuse to reach out to people, really across the globe. There's a whole network. Last year I had my Wharton Business School reunion, and we started a WhatsApp group. And when all this broke out, it revived itself. And it's been fascinating to hear from folks around the globe. So it's been really, really amazing.
That's great. Excellent. Good. Great. And I see some folks are still answering the poll. So let me ask you another question. So if social is filled, I was asking the question earlier about your well. What would you say is in your well? Like let's just say we get all these 5 buckets filled. Okay. What would be the big why for you? Like what's, you said extroverted, right? But in terms of your well, like what would you say, what defines your well?
Like what drives me most?
Yeah.
Like the purpose or?
Yeah. Well, forget the buckets for a second. Just like that bigger well, because if you had all 5 of these buckets filled, what do you think would be available for you in life or for people around you?
I mean, I think social, but I think then that also feeds into community. I think that just sort of being a part of something bigger and getting involved is just something that I really like to try to do. And really, you talked a little bit about sort of that helping others that's really something I enjoy, is being a connector and bringing people together. So, just finding ways to do that has been a big thing.
And that's what I was thinking. I think if I can offer some words, right? Connection seems to be a big part of your energy, right? And a lot of us, we think about the different currency of energy, and I think connection seems to be one of those things that not just you being connected, but you creating connection.
Yeah.
Am I right? Do you?
Yeah,
are you
very much.
That if I met you somewhere and you've met someone else, you'd be like, oh, you should talk to me. Yeah, and I think that's what, just to let you know, because this is the first time you've heard these concepts, that I think is your well. So if your well, right, was full of connections that you had made, and even though you're not around or in that community or in that neighborhood, you knew that those connections were established and were almost, seeded so that they could grow and kind of, what's the word I'm trying to use? Like a garden, like really manifest. I think that seems to be something that would fill your well of sorts. Yeah. Great. Excellent. Now, can I ask you a little challenging question?
Sure.
Yeah. So which of these 5 do you think you have, you haven't been focusing on? Which of these 5 do you think, I don't, or maybe you didn't understand the 5. You didn't see how, oh, okay, I've been avoiding this one, or I have just ignored it, didn't think about it over the last couple of weeks, or maybe just the last couple of months or years.
It's interesting. I would probably say the purpose career, because I think I've become comfortable with what I'm doing, and I've got a good routine. But I think I need to find ways to kind of keep moving forward with that. I think that's sort of the area. If there was something that, sort of coming out of this that would stand out, that would probably be one.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being so honest about that. I think what I heard is not necessarily you're in the wrong job or wrong place, but it's just like you're at a place where you're comfortable, and for connections for you is important. So it would make sense that you potentially want to establish new connections, and that you might even want to. You might have your so I coach strengths, right? Your strengths, right, might be on autopilot, and some of your strengths are kind of part of your buckets too. And if you're not filling the bucket for you, that is learning, discovering, inquiring, right? Because that's actually why you volunteered to be here today, right? You're learning and discovering, right? And if you're potentially not filling that bucket at your job, then you would be looking for other roles or opportunities. And if it's not in your company, where else do you think it could be?
Right.
Where do you think it could be if it's not in your company? Where else could you be uncomfortable and exploring and learning?
Well, definitely community. I mean, I think that's one of the things is sort of taking leadership roles and in different organizations and volunteering and just finding new avenues and new groups to get involved with.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Any questions you have, or any final thoughts as we kind of transition and see?
No, I mean, I just think this is really great food for thought, and it's I'm excited to be a part of this. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Excellent. Thanks, Lucy. Let me go ahead and share my screen again, folks, because one of the things that Lucy gave us an example of is the fact that, whatever we decide to do, it's really small steps that we want to take. So I want to caution you and give you a disclaimer that you may have thought about this and throughout the thing saying, darn, I didn't do that, or I should do this, or I should do this. I want you to not should all over yourself, as a coach of mine tells me, right? I want you to have some self-compassion. I want you to be generous with yourself today, right? You don't want to be thinking, I could have, should have done that. Okay, I'm going to leave you with just what are some of the actionable, how do you fill your buckets? First of all, they're just short-term decisions. Okay, you don't have to do some long-term pledge right now. Today, in the next 30 minutes or next hour, you can just think about one of these buckets. Or next week, you could say, you know what? On Monday, I'm going to think about career purpose. On Tuesday, I'm going to think about social. Wednesday could be, financial, and so on. And maybe you could just share this with someone else and create a little buddy system or something. But better awareness, right? And choices in the moment. So when you're aware of what's inspiring or motivating you to make certain choices, you actually make better choices in the moment. And finally, changing your daily routine a little bit can have a huge impact on the quality of each day. we usually underestimate how small one thing is. So for example, Pedro said he was meditating. Well, all it takes is 3 minutes. And heck, yesterday I was on a call where someone asked me to just breathe for 1 minute. And that 1 minute, like the 1 minute meditation, slowed down about 3 hours worth of video calls that I was on back to back right before I called. Okay. Now this was someone who's in an awesome coaching program, getting ready to get certified. And, she didn't have to say much except, hey, would you take the next minute and just close your eyes and take a deep breath, or 2 or 3. So I invite you to make a small daily routine choice that is going to shift potentially the next week, because then it becomes a habit. Okay. All right. I see a couple of things. Call to action. Yeah. Let's go to a poll. Which of these buckets would you like to focus on this weekend? So this weekend, from now till Saturday or Sunday, which of these buckets from what you've heard? In the meantime, I'm going to take a look at some of the questions. I saw a couple of questions in there. So first of all, given the times, is it normal to feel like I desperately need a vacation? I've been self-isolated for 2 months. Yeah, completely normal, right? How many of us, here's the challenge right now. With career well-being, a lot of us, the work-life balance went from, oh, I'd love to work from home all the time. Why doesn't my company give me that access? To now, they're making you work from home all the time. And there is no such thing as work from home, because work and home for a lot of us looks like the same place. And for those of us with kids and parents and roommates, right, and other people, right, partners in our home, you're starting to find ways. So here, for example, is my nice cherry blossom room divider. I got this from Amazon for $99, right? So that I can actually have a division, right, at the end of my work day, right? So that my partner and I can actually know when there's a knock on the door. Right now, it's great that we can go for a walk 3 times a day. But like, what if, when she's ready for a walk, I'm not ready, okay? So whatever it is, you want to kind of figure out work and home. So back to the vacation question, Jill, what does vacation mean to you? I know what it looks like to me. I'm a Southwest Airlines companion pass traveler. I used to be on a plane every weekend. When this happened, a lot of my friends said to us, hey, you guys must have feel like your wings are clipped. Well, yeah, kind of. But you know what vacation could look like? Vacation could just look like one room of the day. You just change it completely. Vacation could look like with your kids. Maybe you have them do Cosmic Kids yoga in one room while you do your yoga somewhere else. Vacation, we're going to have to be imaginative. And you know what the best place to do? If you can't come up with ideas, look for someone in the chat who can. And someone else has ideas that's working for them. That's what I would say. Your question, Pedro, about does purpose need to be connected to one's career? As you heard, not at all. They can be completely separate. And that's what some of these, like this organization, for example. And finally, for someone that is retired, what does purpose, career encompass? You know what? If you know Latinos who are retired, but they're not, they're writing a book, they're doing volunteering. Did you know that right now you could actually read stories out loud and record them for kids as part of your community service? Completely safe, no mask needed. That's something as simple that you can do and you can encourage. So let's just take a look at the poll that we wrapped up. Which of these buckets would you like to focus on this weekend? It looks like physical is the one that people are in community. Great. Excellent. 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 Well, I'm going to, Vianney, great. I just wanted to wrap up to say, which buckets will fill your well today? Okay. What do you think, Vianney? We've had a lot of good questions, a lot of good chats. What did you hear today that really struck a chord with you?
I love the no shoulds. That was a really great tip. Love the division idea. The fact that wellness is not well-being. Sometimes I've personally thought about and sometimes correlated, but I don't necessarily think that that's the case after learning about this. So thank you so much, Eduardo. This is excellent.
Thank you. And Vianney, I wanted to let people know, for those of you who have kids, there's an awesome book called How Full Is Your Bucket? The kid version. And you can teach your kids, right, about bucket fillers and bucket dippers. And here's a little screenshot example of that. A couple other resources will make this available to everyone.
Yes, definitely. We will send that after the talk today. So I think that is all the time that we have for today. So in closing, thank you so much, Eduardo, for your incredible insights today. Thank you to everybody who joined us. I know you're taking time out of your very busy days to attend and participate. We appreciate everybody who shared their honesty and candor and raw feedback. So that's great. So go ahead, and I want to just plug a couple of things before we kick off. and end the talk today. We are going to be sending a survey, so let us know what you thought of the talk today, what you learned, and what you want to hear next. And as a big bonus, as much as I'm sure you enjoyed today, Eduardo has actually so graciously offered one complimentary coaching session to one of you. So to do so, take the survey, and one lucky survey taker will be eligible to do that. So I encourage you to do that after the meeting today. Again, thank you all so much. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks, and I hope you continue to stay healthy and safe and be well. Thanks again, Eduardo.
Hasta luego.
Nos vemos. Bye-bye.